Hello, Tech fans, and welcome into the latest Tech Sideline Podcast, originating from TSL's high-tech studios in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Whether you are watching or listening live or archived, we are so glad you could join us today as we record on Wednesday, November 6th, and we break down the Virginia Tech win over Clemson and men's basketball on Tuesday night as the hoop season is underway, and we preview the Wake Forest Virginia Tech football game on Saturday. Of course, that game will be an opportunity for Virginia Tech fans to honor Bud Foster. And so throughout the podcast, we'll be talking about great Bud Foster moments. So a lot to get to today. Our crew today is the same as always. We've got Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes producing on the podcast set, our managing editor, Chris Coleman, our founder and head honcho, Will Stewart, and I'm your podcast host, Evan Hughes. Again, glad everybody could join us today. We are recording on Wednesday morning, November the 6th. A lot to get to today on the Tech Sideline Podcast, which is presented by the Fisher Law Firm each and every week. The Fisher Law Firm is Virginia's trusted DUI and traffic defense firm dedicated to defending individuals charged with traffic-related offenses. From their offices in Blacksburg and Roanoke, the Fisher Law Firm handles cases throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. To date, the firm has defended more than 30,000 people charged with moving violations. For a free consultation, call anytime, day or evening, toll free at 1-800-680-7031. Again, that's 1-800-680-7031, or email them at info@fisherlegal.com. Gentlemen, good morning. We did the podcast on Monday, and we talked about towards the end. We were talking so much about the Notre Dame Tech game. Hoop season does open on Tuesday, and we quickly talked about the Clemson Tech game. We did a podcast preview of the men's basketball season a few weeks back, and wow, what a way to start off the Mike Young era at Virginia Tech. 67-60 win for the Hokies over the Tigers. Will, I know you watched the whole thing, diving right into it. What a way to kick off the Mike Young era at Virginia Tech.
Yeah, that was something. So the first two thoughts that come to mind for me are we had heard that Landers Nolley was Tech's best player. And that, wow, he looked really tight early. He looked jacked. He
missed his first two shots and his first two free
clanked
throws,
a couple
right?
of free throws, and of course that started people on the boards and Twitter going, "Oh, I'm not impressed." And then he settled in, and at one point I think he was 11 of 14 or 11 of 15 after missing his first two. I mean, he just got in a groove. And so the other thing was, Tech got down, what was it? It was 11 to, I think P.J. Horn was the first one to score. P.J. Horn hits a three-pointer. Tech's up 3-0. Clemson scores something like 13 of the next 15
It was
points.
3-3. They scored a three first.
Did they score a three first?
And then they went on an 8-0 run, and it was 11-3.
Yeah, so at that point it just looked ugly. And then Nolly started hitting some shots, and some good things started happening. And it wasn't a pretty game, particularly in the second half. Both teams, I think, made some adjustments, and Clemson missed a lot of shots. But hey, I'll take the win any way you can get it. It's just really cool because not only was it Mike Young's first game at Tech, but it was his 300th career win. So it's just really cool to start things off with a bang like that.
Real quick, when I got home last night and I rewatched the game a little bit, one of the first thoughts for some reason that came to mind, I was like, I can't wait to ask Chris how Champs was last night. So
no, it was on ESPNU, so I was able to.
Oh, okay. So I was excited to hear how Champs was,
no,
but
I'm sure it was not very exciting on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, they tend to not have much of a crowd, and it's.
I mean, I wouldn't have gone to Champs. I would have walked across the street to Cinnabon so I could walk home.
So we do need at some point we need the Champs barometer though, because Tech's been to 3 straight NCAA tournaments. Is that increasing fan interest at all? We can't answer that right now.
So, I mean, Chris, again, we just broke this down 2 weeks ago, the preview for the team. We talked about the youth on the team. Coach Young has talked about that. Did you foresee a 67-60 win on the road last night?
Actually, a win didn't surprise me. Not necessarily because I thought highly of Tech, as I thought Clemson was going to be pretty bad this year. With some starting 2 freshmen in the backcourt, plus 4 of their top probably 6 or 7 players are all transfers. And it's just a bunch of guys who have never played together before. So to me, the teams were the exact same.
Kind of a similar situation to Tech.
Clemson a little bit older because they took transfers rather than reclassifying freshmen. But I also think Tech had more overall talent than Clemson does. So I really wasn't all that surprised to see Tech win the game, and it doesn't really change my view of either team. I think I knew Landers Nolley was going to be good. I don't think you talk about somebody as much as Mike Young has talked about him. Mike Young does not strike me as the type that is prone to hyperbole, right? So figured Landers Nolley was good. I didn't realize he was going to be 30 points good. It was interesting the way the game unfolded. Really what impressed me the most really was Tech's defensive rebounding.
Yeah.
They start a 6'6", let's call it what is, a 6'4.5" center, and a guy who would be undersized even as like a small forward.
P.J. Horn
we're talking about. And they were still able to really dominate the defensive glass. They had 9 offensive rebounds to Clemson's 8, which is really impressive considering the number of shots that Clemson missed.
Clemson missed a ton of shots.
I bet if you look at their defensive or their offensive rebound percentage after game 1, I bet it's one of the worst in the whole country. Their second half was positively NC State-like.
I think at one point in the first half, particularly towards the end of the first half, I don't remember my halftime stats, but I think both teams were shooting about 45% at one point late in the first half, and it went downhill from there.
Yeah. It was I went into halftime thinking, man, that was a clean game in the first half. That was an entertaining basketball game.
And the second half was
not so much.
Well, Clemson only had 23 points in the entire second half.
I think they were 1 of 14 from 3-point range.
Oh,
whatever, 7.1%.
1 of 14 from 3, and the second. No, the whole game. You're right.
I thought about
second half.
Before I posted the recap, I finally just posted it without the video highlights because I don't know why the ACC. It was almost midnight. And
it was about midnight when they put them up.
Yeah, I was like, I'm ready to go to bed.
But by the way, I added 2 videos to our game recap. The ACC Digital Network put together a highlight package of Landers Nolley. Almost every shot he made. It's about 2 minutes 11 seconds long. And then they did put together game highlights. So those are both in our game recap now.
Go check that out, techsideline.com. Great recap, great video. Let's talk about Landers Nolley a little bit specifically. I mean, he scored 30 points, but I want to discuss what he did well yesterday. I want to share a tweet from Jimmy Robertson. He put this out there last night that to put his performance into perspective, Ace Custis, 16 points in his college debut. Del Curry, 10. Bimbo Coles had 7. He put that out there. And then the other one was about his 30 points by Nolley in his college debut, or the most by a Tech freshman in any game since Jalen Hudson had 32 against Wake Forest in the first round of the 2015 ACC tournament.
So it's a freshman debut record and one of the best by a freshman in years. I think I also saw that Nikhil Alexander-Walker had 24.
He had 24 in his debut.
But
that was at home against Detroit Mercer, and he was surrounded by Justin Robinson and Chris Clark.
Isaiah Wilkins had, so it's funny. So here's the tweet I almost answered. Isaiah Wilkins, I think, had 21 against Gardner-Webb at home. And I wanted to kind of quote tweet it and say, talking about Landers Nolley versus Clemson on the road and Isaiah Wilkins versus Gardner-Webb at home, one of these things is not like the other.
Exactly.
It's no doubt. Not only is it just numerically a record, but the circumstances, really, really remarkable.
And again, this is different from previous years. Tech opening up with an ACC team. Of course, ACC teams playing 20 conference games this year. But Chris, speaking specifically about Nolley, for those that did not get to watch the game, what did he do well in the game? How did he get to 30 points?
A lot of guys, especially when they're young players, are just shooters or they're just drivers or whatever. He was able to flash a mid-range game combined with a three-point game. And I didn't realize he would be able to do both of those. I knew he could fill it up from the outside. Yeah. I did not know he had that mid-range game. And, he didn't necessarily show it as much last night, but he's tall enough. He's 6'7". He can score around the basket as well. So he looks like he has the ability to be one of those complete offensive players. Now, it's just one game.
Teams are going to start keying on him.
Yeah, absolutely, because somebody else is going to have to start scoring. Because, if he had an off night last night, which he will have at some point, just because that's how basketball works, then that's a blowout city in the other direction, right? And let me dig deep into my bag of memories here. I remember, I guess it was the 2000-2001 season. I was a senior in high school, and I came to the first basketball game of the season, and it was the fairly highly anticipated debut of Bryant Matthews, Carlos Dixon, and Chris Exelis. They're all. It was a pretty.
Exelis was a highly rated player.
Yeah, it was a pretty highly touted class for Virginia Tech. Bryant Matthews turned down a football scholarship to Florida State. He was a really good two-sport athlete. So that game, Matthews scored 10, and I'm thinking, man, he can be a decent player for us. I think Dixon scored 17, and I'm like, oh, well, yeah, looks like a pretty good player. Exelis scored like 20 or 21. I'm like, man, this guy's the truth.
Yeah.
By the end of the year, he was barely playing, transferring to DePaul where he was a career backup.
Yeah.
Dixon had a good career. Matthews, after starting with the second half of his junior year, had a great career. He was
his senior year was incredible.
First team All Big East player. He was a great player.
And I really think he should have gotten Big East Player of the Year as a senior.
Yes, considering what he was surrounded by.
Oh, they went with some dude from UConn, I think.
Yeah, of course they did. Yeah. But all I'm saying here is, one game does not make a career. Because I thought Chris Exelis was going to be awesome the first time I saw him play because he scored 21 points. So pump the brakes a little bit, but yes, I agree the physical ability is there, and he's going to have his ups and downs. Even Nikhil, remember he started off his career with 24 points. Well, later that year when Tech played at Kentucky, you know how many points he scored in that game?
It's like 3 or 4.
No, it was like 0.
Yeah.
Literally 0 points. So he's going to have his ups and downs, and when he has his downs, this team is going to have some downs because I think Aline's a natural scorer.
Yeah, he had 11.
But he's a 17-year-old freshman.
Yeah.
Right? And that's probably your secondary scoring option right now.
I like his confidence. He came in hit 2 threes right away.
I agree. I think he reminds me of some kind of left-handed mix between Xavier Dowdell and Justin Bibbs.
All right, I'll file that one right. So one more thought on Nale. I agree with everything Chris said, and one of the things that surprised me, there were a couple instances where his catch and shoot from behind the 3-point line was quick.
Very quick release. Absolutely.
I mean, not Del Curry quick. Nobody does it like Del Curry did it in his prime, but it was surprisingly fast and nothing but net. It's not like he rattled it in. It was smooth.
Real quick, before we move off Landers Nale, I want Will to kind of have the last word on Nale. We came into the office this morning, and Will's chuckling about something over at his computer. I'm like, Will, what are you laughing at? Kind of hoping it was what I had seen last night on Twitter. Will, what was the Clemson men's basketball Twitter page looking like last night? How about you enlighten our fans that did not see it?
Tech fans, go to Clemson basketball's Twitter feed, which is Clemson MBB. And look for the tweet they put out last night. There are no graphics accompanying it. It is just a tweet saying Virginia Tech wins 67-60. Then it lists a couple of Clemson players and how many points they scored. And Tech fans piled in. And at the time we started recording this podcast, there were 211 responses, all just pictures of Landers Nale, his headshot from his profile on Hokiesports.com. So it's over 200 responses of Landers Nale's face over and over and over. And keep scrolling down because there's a couple funny ones buried in there. One of them is a Sesame Street video about the letter L. And then there's other variations like Landers Nale's face on a train. And you've been
the Nale
trolley. Right. So great stuff. Clemson MBB on Twitter. And when we went in to record the podcast, it was about 4 tweets deep. Great stuff.
Yeah, there you go. Go check that out, Clemson MBB on Twitter. And I tell you what, I'll get to how Twitter was reacting in the message boards in a minute. Quickly, do want to highlight Naheem Aline. You alluded to 11 points. You look at the scoring breakdown. Landers had 37 minutes, by the way. Yeah. Played basically the whole game.
He's going to have to play basically.
But, one thing I do want to kind of bring up, I was thinking about this last night. I was really thinking about the Buzz Williams leftover players, and I don't want to say it like that because they're going to be a core, but the guys who were, let me rephrase, that were on the team last year with Buzz Williams. The guys like PJ Horn and Wabisa Beatty, Wilkins, Radford who played. I was thinking about what they've been through since, they're playing in the Sweet 16. A lot of them were key role players. They were a tipping away from going to overtime with Duke in the Sweet 16.
Right.
To having their coach leave in a week, to Coach Young hired, to some of them in the transfer portal, to Kerry Blackshear leaving, just a ton of turnover. Mm-hmm. And for them to win that game And for someone like Horn to have that and one dunk at the end to Beatty, I mean, 7 points, 6 assists, 8 rebounds. I just felt really, I'm sure as you guys looking at this, you have to feel good for those guys to have that kind of moment after, I'm sure, what was a uneasy offseason at times.
Yeah. Buzz Williams is the type of coach that his players commit for Buzz Williams and not necessarily the school they go to. And you see it like even in the summer at Tech, he would have these summer softball games on the Tech softball fields with his former players. Like Jimmy Butler came to Virginia Tech last summer. Or the summer
Jay Crowder, I think, was there too.
Last, yeah, to play in a softball game of Buzz's former players. Like they're that loyal to Buzz. So you come to somewhere for a specific reason, and then that reason departs, and that's difficult, very difficult actually. It's not necessarily the same thing in football because there's 85 guys on a team. How close are you going to be to your head coach anyway? But in basketball, you're dealing with that guy on a very personal basis every single day.
Yeah, I mean, head basketball coaches are very active during practice.
Yeah.
We sat and watched that part of that first practice on media day.
They're the head coach at practice.
They're
not
walking
just
around. Mike Young was out there saying, "You over here, you screen him on this side." He's there. They're
right.
heavily embedded with the players.
Right. Whereas like Justin Fuente is not going to say one thing to a defensive tackle an entire practice. Right.
Yeah, and
he might watch the film of practice afterwards and then talk to him about certain things, but
he's not going to walk around the offense telling every individual player where to line up and what to do.
22 guys on the field, and he's going to coach every single one of them. Right? That's not how football works.
So that's an interesting point. I never thought about that. Head basketball coaches are different. They're very heavily involved.
They're heavily
players.
involved with everybody on their team. So yeah, from that standpoint, it is difficult. And we saw Beatty put his name in the transfer portal, and we saw Nolly put his name in the transfer portal, and ultimately those guys decided to stay because. Beatty, I was mad when he had that turnover that almost gave Clemson the lead back.
Yeah.
But he certainly made up for it down the stretch, didn't he?
Yeah, I meant to bring that up.
Blocked a shot.
How about that block shot? I'm sorry. So they come out of timeout. It's 60-57, and Beatty. I mean, is it fair to say that's maybe one of the plays of his career? I mean, that was
no doubt.
unreal.
No doubt. I don't know how many games Tech will win this year, but that will be one of the plays of the season, whether they win 10 or whether they win 20 or whatever. I mean,
yeah, and so let's point out that Nolly was pretty quiet down the stretch. He got to 30 points, and I haven't gone back and looked at the box score. He didn't score for the last few minutes of the game.
That's accurate.
And Beatty was the guy making plays.
Him and Aline making free throws.
Yeah. So by the way, Tech started out 1 of 6 from the free throw line, made 12 in a row.
I think it was 13.
13, and then missed their last one. I think they wound up 14-16. So they made 13 out of their last 14 free throws.
13 in a row in the final, and starting at the 9:09 mark, and I don't think they missed one until 13 seconds left in the game when it was already decided.
Yeah, and a couple things too. It's a tie game. Clemson's full court pressing. It looks like there's going to be a turnover, and then somehow it just gets pushed out to P.J. Horn.
It was Beatty.
It was Beatty. That's right.
Came up with a loose ball and pushed it out.
Now, and some of that was luck, the way the ball was
correct.
Was rattling around, but hey, we'll take it.
Horn, the and one dunk, which was a great. And then listen, P.J. Horn. We talked about how he's undersized playing the center position. Listen, 8 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists. Was 1 for 1 at the free throw line in 36 minutes.
He's not going to be a low post scorer. Like I know he had the breakaway dunk. He had a 3-pointer. He had 1 free throw. I don't remember his. I think. How many points was that?
I'm sorry. What were you saying?
Well, was it him that Wilkins fed with that beautiful pass?
Yeah.
You remember the one I'm talking about in the first half?
Yeah, I think so.
So if you're looking for 2 other points, that's probably where it came from.
I guess that's it. Yeah. But he's not going to be a guy who's going to score in the paint very much. But it's important that he rebound, and he did a good job defensive rebounding against bigger guys. And there's another thing you got to give Beatty credit for. That dude is a beast rebounding as a point guard.
8 rebounds.
8 rebounds.
Wow.
I mean, Tech out-rebounded Clemson 44-36, I think. And, Clemson's not the biggest team in the world, but they're bigger than Virginia Tech. And it's going to be very important this year for Beatty to rebound better than the other team's point guard. Because we need to – there are certain individual battles that we're probably not going to win. But that's one that we have to win if we want to break even in the rebound.
I actually read it wrong. I apologize. Horn had 7 rebounds. The leading rebounder on the team for Tech was Beatty with 8.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of segues into, I watched him last night, and he's still, I think he has the ability, but he doesn't have the confidence to break down a defense and go all the way to the rack. And that's one thing that unless he starts doing it, you're going to miss that this year. I mean, Justin Robinson, people used to complain about Robinson going in and throwing up wild shots, but you got to take the good with the bad. And I thought Justin did a very good job of being aggressive going to the basket, and that's something Beatty has lacked in his career so far. I think it's just a confidence issue. I think his handle's good enough. I think his athleticism's good enough. Time and again, you see him with some sort of path to the basket, and he'll sort of probe it, but not really be aggressive with it.
Yeah, and he's going to have to get to the line some this year because, let's assume Landers Nolly doesn't score 30 points every game this year. If he does, bye-bye Nolly at the end of the season, right? Let's assume that doesn't happen, so points are going to have to come from somewhere. And, the Tech's second leading scorer last night did score 11 points, but he was 2 of 9 from the field. So where are those points going to come from? So I think it's important to get some up at the free throw line.
Well, Wilkins had an off game.
He did have an off night.
We love some Isaiah Wilkins. I love that guy.
But I'll say this about Chico. And Chris, for those that have not heard it because you haven't said it all year, what's the description of Isaiah Wilkins? I do have to bring this up.
I saw him at Kroger this summer, and I was like, who's that defensive end? I don't recognize him. Oh, that dude. What was
I'm sorry, and he's going to be the guy at YMCA.
Exactly. He's going to be the guy at YMCA that nobody thinks can play when he's like 40 or 50 years old.
Oh,
he's just going to go in there and crush everybody.
I played pickup ball with a guy like that after I graduated from Tech, I lived in Charlottesville for the next 7 years, and we used to play pickup ball once a week at a local elementary school, Woodbrook Elementary, which. The interesting hook about Woodbrook Elementary is that Mike Harris of the Richmond Times-Dispatch now lives in that neighborhood, so he knows what I'm talking about. But we used to play pickup ball, and I don't remember this guy's name. Interestingly enough, he actually bought a car off of me later, but he was just that guy. Little heavy, just great hands, sneaky guy that could find that open spot, could make that pass, just the guy you wanted on your team. But if you were just lining up on the playground, you wouldn't pick him.
I don't know who it was for Clemson that took that charge from Wilkins, but that is a brave soul.
Chico had 6 boards last night.
Yeah.
I mean, he might not have been scoring, but he had 6 rebounds.
Well, everybody had a good night on the boards last night. Hunter Couture did not obviously have a good offensive night, but he had 4 rebounds, 23 minutes from the 2-guard position. So, yeah, I thought everybody did a good job rebounding their position last night, and that shows up in the team box score.
So we'll see where it goes from here.
Last thing I do want to kind of recap. I saw this tweet. I thought it'd be kind of cool to bring up because a lot of people were really excited for the Coach Young era. Of course, this is someone who's coming home, has ties to the New River Valley. As he says, grew up in Castle Coliseum. I want to read a tweet from.
Is this a McFarling tweet?
Aaron McFarling. I'm going to read this tweet, and he goes, "Quote: Clemson employee in the elevator was tickled because Hokies coach Mike Young told her she did a great job tonight. Not sure what her job was exactly. Something around the benches." Personality-wise, VT has found it's Frank Beamer in sneakers, close quote, from his tweet. So I just kind of want to get your thoughts on what Coach Young, since he's gotten here, what he's done to the fan base that's already, hungry for basketball after 3 consecutive NCAA tournaments, but how you think he is connected with fans. And it does feel like there's a different kind of energy around this program separate from the last 3 years.
Well, it's different. Certainly there was a lot of energy. There's not any more or less energy now. It's just different. Buzz would show up at Hokie Club events and make it very clear that he didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
And it was just so obvious that
he had a contentious relationship with local media and made no bones about it.
And made no bones about it. I even sat there personally and watched him tell the students one time that he didn't care if they came to games or not, but if they're going to come to the Duke game, then they better come to the first game too, or something like that.
Something like that.
So he didn't care what people thought of him because he knew he wasn't going to be here very long, right?
Yeah, he was all about building that bubble around himself and his players and us against the world.
Right, and his players love him for it.
Yeah,
and
it works.
He's the best guy in the world to work for or play for. But if there's any other relationship, whether you're a fan, whether you're local media, you're like, man, that guy better win because he's dislikable from the perspective of he doesn't get along with anybody except for the people that work for him directly.
Yeah.
Mike Young's different. He's always wanted to be at Virginia Tech. He can sit down at a Hokie Club meeting and have a regular conversation with, your average Joe Virginia Tech fan that Buzz Williams couldn't do. Or maybe Buzz Williams could have done, he just didn't want to.
And I think the hiring of Ace Custis was all about connecting with the fan base.
Sure.
I think it's important to him.
Yeah.
So now this is all fun and exciting because Tech's 1-0.
Yeah.
There will be difficult times ahead, things that you don't see coming. I think winning this game was very important to the psyche of the players. If they'd lost this one, then played a bunch of cupcakes at home, then gotten destroyed out in Maui, you start to wonder. This shows them they can win.
Yeah, and I do think it's important for confidence. And Brad Brownell and Mike Young both said the same thing. They said, I don't really like opening with an ACC opponent, but we understand why we have to do it. It's one of those things where Brownell still feels that way. Mike Young, he probably still feels that way, but he's really happy. If you do win that game, I mean, that's a really good start to your season. If you win 20 conference games, now Virginia Tech is 1-0, and they've only got 9 road games left, and they've got 10 home games. It's not going to matter this year, but in a year where you're going to the NCAA tournament or maybe you're a bubble team, that matters. Yeah. Get that road win out of the way, and the numbers stack up in your favor after that to a certain extent.
It's a very valid point.
And now Tech has 4 games in a row against
4 bye games, we'll put it that way, B-U-Y.
Yep. 4 low major opponents.
Coppin State on Friday is the next one, home opener.
The next one. Coached by a former Maryland player, Juan Dixon.
Yeah, how about that? Is Maryland Eastern Shore in there anywhere?
No, I don't think so, but I don't remember.
Actually, I believe
Tech does play him this year.
Do they play him?
There's going to be the likes of VMI and Gardner Webb in there.
Well, basically, my basic point is they got a chance to be 5-0 going to Maui.
Right.
Now, that being said, with a young team like this, there's no guarantee. I mean, a Buzz Williams team that went to the NIT lost to Alabama State to start a season.
Right.
I mean, you see young teams that are picked near the bottom of their conference every year lose to low major teams that they have no business doing. Tech will probably do that at some point this year.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, listen, great conversation about Hokies hoops this morning, and 67-60 winners over Clemson on Tuesday evening on the road. We still have a lot to get through on the Tech Sideline podcast. We're going to be discussing, of course, the Wake Forest Demon Deacons and the Hokies meeting up on Saturday in Lane Stadium. And we'll be talking a lot about the man who's on our screen right now, Bud Foster, as the Hokies honor the legendary defensive coordinator against Wake Forest. We step aside for a timeout. We'll be right back with Hokies football talk. This is the Tech Sideline podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm. Welcome back aboard the Tech Sideline podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm. So glad that everybody could join us today. We're recording on Wednesday morning, November the 6th. We just broke down Virginia Tech basketball's win over Clemson, open up their season, and now we dive right back in to Hokies football talk. Big game this weekend against the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. We got our normal crew as always, Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes producing. We've got Chris Coleman, Will Stewart, and I'm Evan Hughes on the podcast set. Guys, let's shift over to football, where this is a game we talked a little bit about on Monday's podcast, kind of recapping Notre Dame. This is not your traditional Wake Forest Demon Deacon team coming into Blacksburg. This is a team that actually, when we started the podcast back up in August, there were some beat writers in North Carolina that thought Wake Forest had a chance to be undefeated coming into Blacksburg. They're 7-1. They're in the top 20 of the initial college football playoff rankings. And
number 18, I believe.
Number 18, that's correct. Chris, I mean, how good is this Wake Forest team? And let me ask you this. I think you said this, but I want to confirm. Is this team better than Notre Dame?
Yes. In my opinion, they're better on balance than Notre Dame. Their defenses, I think, are ranked about the same. Wake's offense is much, much better than Notre Dame's offense. So, Wake's had some good teams in the past, but they never had particularly dynamic teams, and this is a dynamic team. Newman could be the first Wake Forest quarterback drafted since 1989. It's possible.
He's young, right?
He's a redshirt junior.
Okay.
He developed over time. He redshirted and developed over time. No huge expectations.
Did someone say redshirt, Will?
Yep.
Wake Forest has well over 60 guys who have an R in front of their classification.
And that's not counting the true freshmen who are redshirting this year. There's probably at least 20 of those.
Look, Chris breaking out a little bit of a smile. Look at it.
There's only 4 true freshmen, and they're 2 deep. Every single offensive starter has redshirted. Oh, what a beautiful program.
Yeah.
But that's how you have to do it that way at Wake Forest. I mean, you need to keep guys for 5 years and start 7 redshirt seniors on offense like they're doing this year. You start 7 redshirt seniors on offense, and you give them a dynamic quarterback who's not necessarily a redshirt senior, and a dynamic wide receiver in what's his first name?
I keep wanting to say Chaz. It's
no,
It's
it's
not Chaz. You've got the roster card literally sitting on your lap.
All right. Hang on a second.
It's Sage Surratt.
Sage Surratt, number 14.
He's a redshirt sophomore, and he's a dynamic player. So their 2 best offensive players are actually underclassmen, but they're surrounded by a bunch of seniors, and that's why their offense is, averaging 38 points and 510 yards per game. I mean, this is a dynamic group. They do things differently with their mesh point and the read option. They stay in the backfield a lot longer. They read
the
things
quarterback
a
and the
lot
running
longer.
back sit there and hug and kiss and discuss politics before they actually decide who gets the ball.
Right.
It's interesting to watch.
And Fuente, who obviously has watched a lot of offensive football through the years, he said he's never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
And I haven't either that I can remember.
Well, you got to hold some blocks for those guys.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how Tech plays it. And the thing about Wake is they can run it and they can throw it. Notre Dame can throw it to a certain extent, but they can't run it.
Right.
And they couldn't run it against Tech with their starting running back out.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of want to get your thoughts on the Wake defense before we get back to the offense, because I think the highlight of this team clearly is the offense, and we'll get to that in a minute. This is a defense that has given up 35 to Utah State. Their one loss, they allowed 62 to Louisville. I mean, it literally looks like a basketball score, 62 to 59.
Mm-hmm.
Louisville beat Wake Forest. But then at the same time, they held Florida State to 20, NC State to 10.
That's easy.
What is this defense one that you think is a defense that Virginia Tech can still score 30-plus points? Are they more like the team that gave up 62 to Louisville or 10 to North Carolina State?
Well, North Carolina State,
well, they're a bad team.
Kind of fell apart in that game, and Florida State is a train wreck. So I don't know. I'd put a lot of credence into those results. Let's see. Looking at their starting defenders, they have just 2 seniors. They're not super young, but they're younger on defense than they are on offense. I've only watched one of their games. I sort of had that back and forth game with Louisville on. And I don't, the thing about Louisville is wherever they are as a program, I think they're well coached, particularly offensively. So there's a lot going on there. Yep. So I don't, I think for me, I can't really say anything about the Wake Forest defense in particular. I do think it's important for the Tech offense to have success early. A team like Wake, Chris, they're number 1 in the country in plays per game. Is that right?
6.4 plays per game.
Yeah, so they run that offense at a very fast pace. And what you don't want to happen is, one of the things that can happen in going against an offense that's operating very quickly is if you stop them a couple of times, they're off the field quickly and then they never get any rhythm. Mm-hmm. Your fear is that they do get a rhythm, and your defense starts to just kind of, I don't know what I would call glaze over to some extent. We just had a play, line up, boom, Wake Forest picks up 18, line up, boom, Wake Forest picks up 6. You don't want it to snowball. So it's important for the Virginia Tech offense to get the ball, get some first downs, hold on to it. I'm not saying bleed the clock, let the play clock run down to 1 second or anything like that, but I don't think you can go and start the game by 2 or 3 and outs. That's a really bad recipe. You got to match them at least early on to give Tech's defense a chance to get used to what they're looking at. It always takes 2 or 3 series. Now, the flip side of that is as a defense, you can get into a rhythm too. If the plays are coming boom, boom, boom like that, you can get into a rhythm just like the opposing offense can get into a rhythm. So it's just important that Tech's offense get off to a decent start. I'm not saying 3 straight 10-play drives where they score touchdowns. Just don't go 3 and out a lot early.
So let's keep this going. So we just talked about the Wake defense. Let's talk about the Tech offense, then we'll get back to Wake Forest offense because there's a lot to talk about there. I want to talk about the running game first, Chris. I don't know if the status of Keshawn King is known for this week.
Fuente said he should play, but Fuente also said, man, I'm 0 for 2 and predicting things like this year. So
yeah, I think he thought Hazleton was going to come back earlier than he did, and
thought
Hooker
was going to play last week.
So how important is the running game, especially? And again, I know it's a little bit different when Quincy's in.
It's
running the
important.
football is with him is so much more
Right.
important than with Hooker. But if Hooker's playing, which I think we expect,
It's
how vital is the running game going to
It's
be?
100% vital. We have not seen what Hendon Hooker can do throwing the football when Virginia Tech's running game has been shut down, have we?
No.
Like, I don't know how comfortable if I am with him throwing 35 or 40 passes a game because the running game is averaging 2.5 yards.
Because real quick, the two games that Hooker has gone start to finish, McLeese has gone over the century mark. Miami and Rhode
Really?
Island.
Wow.
He went over against Miami.
That might have been. I'm sorry.
I don't think he won.
That was a stretch of 2 of 3. I apologize.
But yes, McLeese was effective against Carolina, and Hooker was effective running the football.
Man.
The running game was fairly effective against Miami collectively. So that certainly helped loosen things up on the back end, I think. So, yeah, I mean, Tech's going to need to run the football. And Wake's allowing 180 rushing yards per game against Power 5 competition. Now, here's the thing about Wake. I think they're really good. I think they should have beaten Louisville. I mean, they ran 103 plays in that game, and Louisville ran fewer than 70.
Yeah.
It was just
Wow.
there were 2 or 3 long kickoff returns, 1 or 2 for touchdowns. I think they forced 2 interceptions, which is rare for Wake to turn the football over. They're +7 in turnover margin this year. That was a game that Wake Forest should have won. Now, they were also close to losing to Florida State, Utah State, and things like that. I think you generally are who your record says you are. And at the same time, some of those offensive numbers are skewed by the number of plays that they do run. I think they average 5.55 yards per play, which ranks 50th in the country. So upper middle of the pack, you would say. Solid, but not spectacular when they're like 10th or 20th in the other offensive rankings. It's the number of plays they run that brings that up. They actually allow more yards per play than they gain.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a game they can snowball on you. Like if you lose your composure and like if they're running so many plays, you lose your composure and that they can blow you out. But at the same time, if you get some early stops and force them into 3rd and 8s, get them off the field where they're not running 90 plays in a game, hold them to 70 or 75 plays or something like that, you're going to win the game most likely, unless you just have a terrible offensive performance. But you're not having a terrible offensive performance if you hold them to 70 or 75 plays, because that means
you're doing
picking
your
up
part.
first downs.
Yeah.
Right. So this is a game where I think at the end of the game, people are going to look at Tech's defensive stats. If Tech loses, they're going to be like, "Oh, Tech gave up 450 or 500 yards. That's a bad defensive performance." Well, they gave up 440 or 50 yards to Notre Dame, but Notre Dame averaged less than 5 yards a play, which would rank like 90 or 100th in the country.
Yeah.
It's just that Notre Dame ran 90-some plays to Tech's 63 or thereabouts, and that's what you want to avoid. If that same disparity is there against Wake Forest, Tech will get absolutely blown out of the stadium on Saturday. They have to pick up first downs.
So, player to watch is Armani Chapman will be starting in
Yeah.
place of Waller, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's Jermaine Waller picked a bad game.
I was about to say, is this the one
yeah,
game you
yeah.
circled? If it's going to happen,
Oh
this
my
is the one
goodness!
you don't want it
get
to be.
suspended for Georgia Tech. Get suspended for Pitt. Teams that can't throw the football don't get
Yeah.
suspended for this
So
one. Oh.
Sage Surratt, I was going through the NCAA stats, the individual stats yesterday, and I looked up receptions per game, receiving touchdowns, yards per reception, and receiving yards per game. Basically, every major stat that the NCAA keeps, Sage Surratt is in the top 10 of all of them, top 5 or 6 of some of them. And I didn't spend a lot of time checking out their other receivers, but they show up there too. So if you look at their running backs, it's interesting. Both their two best rushers both have 383 yards on the season. Walker, number 25, Kenneth Walker, has
Leading rusher.
54 rushes for 383 yards. That's 7.1 per carry. And Cade Carney has 99 rushes for 383 yards. That's 3.9 per carry. Carney's my boy, man. Watch him. He's a guy I would take.
Sam Rogers.
He's and the thing about Sam was old school mid-90s Tech football player. So is Cade Carney. He's a lot of fun to watch. He's listed at 5'11", 215, which surprises me because when I watched the game of theirs earlier this year, he looked like a 6'1", 240 kind of guy. So keep your eyes out for him.
Real cool. You bring up Sam Rogers playing Madden the other day. Sam Rogers, there he's a free agent on Madden. Signed him to my team. He is on Madden, just to let everybody know. Madden 20, he's
Pop
there.
pass.
So yeah, exactly.
You're going to sign Gerard Evans too?
There's actually a play
on there.
I don't know. You know what? I'll report back on Monday. What current Tech players are on Madden 20? I just traded for Wide Teller. Needed some help on the offensive line.
Yeah, but, let's go over their ratings and all. Of them.
Yeah,
that's your job.
Podcast for another time. Listen, let's focus a little bit more on this Wake Forest offense. I do want to kind of key in on just to let everyone know Sage Surratt, his numbers this year and what he's been able to put up. This is a dynamic receiver for Wake Forest. He's 948 yards. He averages
62 receptions, 948 yards.
He averages 15.3 yards per catch. Is his average, 9 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about Tech receivers this year, is it fair to say that the best challenge that Tech corners have had at receiver is Isaiah Coulter of Rhode Island?
Yes, those Rhode Island receivers were very good. Surratt's taller than the Rhode Island receivers, though. Those guys were, as Brandon Patterson put it, those guys were technicians. They didn't necessarily hit you with explosive athletic talent. They were just really good natural receivers.
Surratt's listed at 6'3", 215.
This guy.
So what kind of challenges is he going to present for the corners?
A big one. The biggest one they faced all year, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think he's a really good player. He's one of those guys that the regular recruiting services weren't particularly high on. But like ESPN Scouting Service, which I always use, they ranked him the number 13 player in the state of North Carolina and said this guy's pretty dynamic. He just needs to, he's raw. And yeah, he's showing it. He's a very dynamic player. I will say that I think Armani Chapman, his first play against Notre Dame, they immediately lined up their tallest receiver on the boundary and went right after him. Claypool, 6'6", 229 pounds. And he was up to the task.
Claypool's that big. Huh? I mean, I know he's big.
Oh, they just run 5 tight ends on the field. Some of them line up as actual tight ends, and some of them line up as receivers. I said
on Monday, I kept getting Cole Kmet, their tight end, confused with Claypool because they're 83 and 84, and in my mind, they were the same guy.
Yeah, they're those outside receivers are monsters. So the good thing is Tech is facing 2 big outside receivers this week, and they faced a whole bunch of big ones last week too. Yeah. So I'm glad they played Notre Dame before Wake Forest from that standpoint. I think Chapman's a good player. Now, he has his moments. He didn't look good at the end, that one drive against Miami. He should have got flagged for a pass interference against Notre Dame in the end zone. But on the whole, he's done a good job. He's way better than Caleb Farley was last year at the same stage, right? Think about that. I mean, yeah. Right. So I'm fine with playing him, but you still have to remember that the guy's a redshirt freshman. I mean, he is Tech's 3rd best corner, but I mean, a young football team just got even younger. You replace a sophomore with a freshman is what Virginia Tech's doing. I'd rather have Waller in there, but I do think Chapman's physically capable of doing the job. He's just such an inexperienced guy right now. But again, like I said, we're going to be looking. A lot of people are going to be looking at Tech's defensive stats at the end of the game. I'm going to be looking at their offensive stats, right. 3rd down conversions. How many 3rd and longs were they in as opposed to how many 3rd and shorts? That's going to be the key to this game is if Virginia Tech's offense can sustain some drives and keep Wake off the field. Fuente said on Tech Talk Live on Monday night, he's like, gosh, the ideal opening to this game is we receive. He said they might think about receiving if they win the toss this week to make sure that that's one fewer possession the defense has without Jermaine Waller, which is smart thinking. That's high IQ football coaching, honestly. He said the ideal opening of the game would be like a 12-play, 80-yard drive that took up half the first quarter. And he's absolutely right. So we'll see how it goes, but yes, that would be the ideal.
Last question before we get predictions. I want to spend some time on the man on the screen, Bud Foster here. Jamie Newman, the quarterback, thrown for over 2,000 yards already, 20 touchdowns, completion percentage at 67.2%. Rank where he is as toughest quarterbacks Tech has faced this year.
Oh, he's the best quarterback Tech has faced or will face this year.
Yeah, I'm not real impressed with Ian Book.
Book's a good player. He's just not as dynamic, and they run a different offense.
So you'll take.
He didn't have as much receiving talent or running back talent around him this year.
So Newman over.
He hit Dax Hollifield in the numbers, though.
Yeah, he did.
So Newman over Howell, Newman over Book, and Newman over Bryce Perkins.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
saying. Okay.
Bryce Perkins is. I don't want to say this, but I don't, because it comes across like I'm a biased Tech fan. But I think Perkins is a good, tough player. Like, he's a really tough player, obviously, to still be standing with what that offensive line puts him through. But he's got 12 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. He's one of the bottom third in PFF rating of ACC quarterbacks. I just remember that wide open receiver last year that he just.
Yeah, that was a big
That was
play.
an awful throw.
Right.
Yeah, the guy dropped it, but yeah, I don't think he's that great. I think he's good, but not great. Yeah, I think it's Newman by far.
So there you go. We'll definitely be talking about Bryce Perkins and those Cavaliers just a couple weeks down the road.
You'll have their time.
Yeah. All right. So guys, Wake Forest is the actually no. Let's get your predictions real quick. Let's do that before we dive into Bud Foster. What do you guys think? Give me as we always do. Give me a player for Tech that you think could stand out, and give me a score, please.
I neglected to do my score prediction in the preview that I wrote yesterday, which is yet to be posted.
Interesting, because I edited it and
didn't notice.
So what I do is I edit the part of the preview up to where Chris makes his prediction. Then I go over and write my prediction. So I didn't even know he hadn't made a prediction yet.
Yeah. So the thing is, I think Tech is going to beat Georgia Tech and Pitt, so that would give them 7 wins at least, 7 or 8 wins depending on the outcome of this weekend's game. And I've struggled to see Virginia Tech being an 8-3 team going into the UVA game. They seem more like a 7-4 product at that stage to me. But at the same time, I do kind of think they're going to win this weekend.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I don't.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why. I think a lot of stuff in the ACC this year is just like
Roll the dice.
It's your turn to lose, right?
Right.
And honestly, does anybody see Wake as an 8-1 team rolling into Clemson? It just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I don't know. I think it's third straight 50-50 game, basically, in my opinion.
So you going Tech or going Wake Forest?
I'll go Wake. Really close. I don't know, man.
Let me ask you this:
get that wheel.
Will
right
the winner? Will the winner have to score more than 35 points, more or less? What do you think?
Well,
I'll put it
if
that.
they do, it probably doesn't bode well for Tech. So I think it'll be in the 30s. Now, if it's kept in the 20s, I think Tech will win it.
Okay.
Yeah, or low 30s.
How many teams have kept Wake Forest in the 20s this year?
Actually,
Florida State held them to 22. That was with a backup quarterback, but with an experienced backup quarterback.
Yeah,
so yeah,
Evan's looking it up. You got it there.
I'm sorry. Actually, I think recently a couple teams have. I was just looking. How about while I'm looking at what do you think? Well, over under.
I kind of feel about this one like I felt about the Notre Dame game last week, and I think Tech will lose a close one. That said, that's the last time I'm picking the Hokies to lose this year. I'm going with W's all the way through. 5-3 or bust is how it's in the ACC Coastal, but that's just kind of the way I feel about it. And I don't remember what my thinking was before the season started. I think I was thinking this was going to be a win. I remember looking at the schedule and thinking losses at Miami, loss at Notre Dame, drop something somewhere else, but not to Wake. Oh, by the way, a comment about this game. If Tech loses to Wake Forest, they will have lost to Duke and Wake Forest in Lane Stadium in the same season.
And could still
win the Coastal.
Yes. There would be a path to an ACC title also, as you brought up earlier. By losing to Wake, and then Wake beats Clemson. Wake wins the Atlantic, and then Virginia Tech wins out and wins the Coastal. They meet again in the ACC title game.
I'm just going to say, if you want to see Wake in the ACC title game, and you want Tech to get in the ACC title game, Wake basically has to win this weekend. But obviously, you don't. It's a double-edged sword. But yes, that is the path.
That's a smiley face you could put on the loss, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but I think I don't know. Before we post our preview, I'll put some numbers on it. But I think this is going to be a loss by the Hokies within 10 points.
I'd also like to point out that at the beginning of the season, when everyone talked about what a horrible home schedule this was, well, this horrible home schedule has given us one of the greatest games in Lane Stadium history against North Carolina. Now it's giving us the number 18 team in the country. And I get that people don't get excited because of their name, but this is the best team on Tech's schedule, home or away. This is a really good team.
Are they the second best team in the entire ACC?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I don't think there's
Well,
any
there you
question.
go.
Yeah, they are. They absolutely. Yeah, they're the, well. There's only 2 teams in the top 25.
So you could talk about it being a bad home schedule, but what you're really saying is the ACC is a bad conference if Wake Forest is the second best team. You could have any schedule. Florida State's way worse. Yeah, I mean, people might get excited, but I mean, Tech would stomp
Florida State.
Yeah, so this is going to be a good game.
And so that segues into something I was thinking about earlier in the podcast while we were talking. You know, Tech sold out the North Carolina game. Wouldn't surprise me to see them sell this one out. Although I think fans are more engaged with the thought of beating North Carolina than they are beating a ranked 7-1.
They are, but I think the fans are happy right now. Satisfied. Right? Not so happy, but obviously they were not after the Duke game. Who was? I
call that staring into the abyss.
Yeah.
You know, what's that literary quote? Something about, take note that when you stare into the abyss stares into you. Anytime Tech puts up a performance like they put up against Duke, that's kind of how I feel. So,
but since then, Tech's played some pretty good football.
Yeah.
And
they played inspired football. They played hard.
That's the thing. And I think most people. I mean, yes, at some point you want to see wins, but you want to see progress, and we've seen progress.
Yeah.
Last thing I'll say. So Wake has been held in the 20s. They beat North Carolina 24-18.
Mm-hmm.
They beat Boston College on the road 27-24. Yeah. They beat Florida State 22-20.
Right. And UNC can't play defense, and they held Wake to 24.
So, all right.
Yeah. All right. So we do want to spend some time on the man who's on our screen today, Bud Foster, who's going to be honored before the game. It was, of course, before the season. He announced he was going to retire after the season. It was announced that this Wake Forest game was going to be a tribute day to Bud Foster and everything that he has meant to Virginia Tech. I know both of you guys wanted to just take some time to reflect on him. It's not over yet. Still plenty of ways to go. But maybe throw in one game that just really stands out to you. And for those listening on Facebook, we'll get to your questions here. Maybe drop a favorite Bud Foster moment or game where he just out-coached everyone else.
The sad thing is the 2 games that stand out to me are losses. Thanks, offense. Right?
Boston College 2007.
It's not that one, because that was a pouring rain, to be fair to Matt Ryan. I'm thinking about the Sugar Bowl against Auburn, when he held 3 first-round picks on offense to about 250 yards and 16 points.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about a game that nobody remembers, 2012 at Clemson. High-powered Clemson offense. Tech held him to about 270 yards. Completely dominant defensive performance, and lost like 38-10 because the offense kept turning the ball over on their own 20-yard line.
Or along that vein, how about the 2013 Alabama game in Atlanta?
Oh,
Alabama like 210 yards of offense?
206. Virginia Tech actually outgained Alabama 212 to 206 in that game.
What was the final?
Completely dominant.
35-10.
Yeah.
I remember because I picked the exact score.
Yep.
But it didn't unfold the way I thought it would. Alabama.
Those were the great jerseys.
So how do we talk about Bud Foster and no, I don't. I actually got in trouble for revealing those jerseys.
Yeah, somebody leaked the all gray uniforms, and
so I put them out there, and
then they wore the maroon pants.
They wore the maroon pants instead to make me look wrong, but they kept the jerseys that I posted. Yeah.
Dang, that was an ugly uniform. Oh my gosh. And they looked like droopy. They had a picture of James Gale wearing the all grays, and they didn't even fit. They looked like he was wearing his loose pajamas or something. It was bad.
Yeah. We just talked about 3 losses.
Yeah. How about this? Let me phrase this way. What impact has Bud Foster made, not just on Tech football, but Virginia Tech, lunch pail defense, college football? What has he meant?
Yeah, it's a brand, and to create your own brand, whether you have help or not, that's pretty impressive. You've got to have the idea first, but then the idea's got to work. And the lunch pail defense idea doesn't work if Tech is 50th in the country in total defense every year throughout the last 2 decades, right? So you got to come up with the idea, and then you've got to back it up. You've got to execute it, and that brand is going to live on at Virginia Tech, no question. I mean, there's you're going to still see lunch pail trailers, lunch pail bars out in the tailgating lot and things like that, man.
If you want to start a fist fight between Tech fans. Ask them who's more integral to the success of Tech football in the 90s and 2000s. Was it Frank Beamer or Bud Foster? Because there's a contingent of Tech fans out there that think, and actually in many organizations, it's not necessarily the guy that's running the organization. It's the people he's got working for him. And Bud is I hope he gets elected to College Football Hall of Fame.
Me too.
Because I think he deserves it.
Yeah, I think he's there should be a spot in there for assistant coach, particularly coordinators, because you could make the stronger argument that he's the best defensive coordinator in the history of college football. I think you can make that argument.
Certainly over time.
The longevity of it. Mickey Andrews was elite, but Mickey Andrews dropped off. Bud hasn't dropped off. His talent dropped off last year. I don't feel like Bud's any worse a coach.
Yeah,
Mickey Andrews was a bad coach by the end of his career.
I don't think Mickey's talent dropped off. He just
had antiquated tactics, basically.
Let me ask you guys this too. Looking at his career and him being here through the transition of Coach Beamer to Coach Fuente and being here through that as well. I mean, it just kind of shows the person that he is too, and just his love and dedication to Virginia Tech.
He could have easily walked away and nobody would have blamed him, and it wouldn't have had anything to do with Fuente. It would have been, I've had the same boss for almost 30 years basically. If I'm going to have a new boss, whether I like it or not now, I'm going to go somewhere else where they'll double my salary, and I'll have a new boss for more money.
He could have just said I'm available, and somebody from the SEC or the Big Ten would have hired him.
They've been throwing $2 million.
$2 million a year.
Right, yeah, and he didn't do that, and he could have done that.
Yeah.
So you talk about, this guy is the definition of loyalty, in my opinion.
Yeah. I had the good fortune of, this was probably late 2000s, early 2010s. So Bud's got his Lunch Pail Defense Foundation, where he raises money and then gives college scholarships to local kids. And he's been doing that for years. Bud kind of, and this is my outside looking in, this is not what people have said to me. Bud, I think at some point in the 2000s made an effort to get his image and the things he was doing in line for getting a head coaching job. That never occurred. But one of the things he started doing was he started the Lunch Pail Defense Foundation and started raising money and handing out scholarships. And he used to do an event in the old, it was the Marriott, for those of you who went to Tech in the 80s, maybe even the 70s. I think it was a Holiday Inn after that, right across from where the big Tech
on-campus hotel.
Yeah, right across the Inn. Thank you. The Inn, right across the street from where the Inn at Virginia Tech is now. And I don't even remember how this happened, because Virginia Tech, the thing I'm about to talk about, we didn't have media access back then. So, I think Bud and I sort of knew each other somehow. We'd met before. But in the late 2000s, the LPD was doing a thing where after the spring game every year, they had former Tech players come in, 4 to 6 guys, and they would have an event where these guys would go to the Marriott / Holiday Inn. They would they'd just talk about football in front of a crowd. So Bud would sell tickets to it. I think it was $100 a pop or something like that. But he needed somebody to MC the event, and his people reached out to me and asked me to MC it, and I did it. I did it for at least 2 years, maybe 3. And for me, it was a blast because I'd never been around the players. And some of the memories I have of that are the first year we did it outdoors in like a courtyard there at the hotel, and the players were late. There were about 6 of them, but they were a good 15 minutes late. And when they walked in, it was Mike Emo, Tyrod Taylor, Macho Harris was there, D'Angelo Hall came in. And the 5th or 6th guy in the group came in at the back, big old, and I tell this story all the time, big old defensive end. I'm like, man, who's the defensive end? And I should have known the list of players.
Isaiah Wilkins.
I was just like, I was just like, I didn't know that. Who is that? I didn't know that guy was coming. And I asked the organizer of this, who's the guy in the back? He said, well, that's Cam Chancellor. And that was my first impression of Cam Chancellor in person, was holy cow, that guy's huge. And I remember some things from some questions I asked him, and I asked him who's the best college player he ever played against, and I remember it was Chancellor. Chancellor answered this. He said it was I think Chris Johnson played for East Carolina.
The running back played for the Cowboys.
Yeah, and he said when he was a freshman, Chris Johnson ran him over at the goal line. And Mike Emo talked about playing against Mario Williams of NC State, and Emo set himself up. You know, Emo was not of large stature, and he said, "Man, so I had blitz protection on a play, and I go out there and I set up, and here comes Mario Williams, and I go to cut him at the knees, and he jumps right over me." So, you know, somebody, probably Cornell Brown, I think, was sitting there, and Cornell said, "Well, that ain't hard, Mike," you know. But the other thing that's really memorable was D'Angelo Hall talking about when Mike Vick got drafted by or came to play for the Falcons. D'Angelo was playing for the Falcons at the time.
No,
other way around. Mike was with the Falcons, and D'Angelo got drafted. And he said his first day at practice, Vic was just slinging the ball all over the place, and they were just completing pass after pass on D'Angelo in practice. And D'Angelo said, he said, "I went home and I laid in bed that night. I looked at the ceiling, and I'm like, I'm not sure I can do this."
And this is not a guy who lacked for confidence.
My jaw hit the floor to hear D'Angelo Hall say in public, "I'm not sure I could do this," you know. And then the last year Bud asked me to do this, we were indoors, and I probably got a little out of hand. It was a lot of fun, but I do remember one sequence where I had Twitter was fairly new at the time, so I had a thing where I did who tweeted it, and I would read a tweet to the crowd that was done by one of the 6 guys up there, you know, and they had to guess who it was, you know, and one of them was Cam Chancellor was afraid to go to the dentist, you know, that's one I remember, and I said one of them was a guy standing by a man standing by a new car that his son had bought for him. Who did that? And it was David Wilson. He had bought his dad a new car. But the reason I say I probably got a little out of hand was during the event, David Wilson tweeted out, it's like, "Who's this Mr. Hokey interviewing, asking all these crazy questions?" You know, and that was the last year I was asked to MC the event for Bud Foster. I never got any negative feedback. Maybe they just switched gears or something like that. But that was a lot of fun, and that I got to know Bud that way. And so that's, everybody has their different memories. That's some of my memories of Bud Foster and being around Bud.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's going to be really cool. And, you know, one thing that's really, I think, kind of neat, again, speaks to Bud as the person, is that this whole year, it just doesn't almost feel like at times that he actually is retiring. He has not made it about himself at all, and the focus have been on the players. That's the way he wants it to be. I mean, he was very clear in his when he announced, he's like, "This is about the players, and there will be a time to talk about it at the end of the year." But I think it just speaks volumes about him. So I'm sure we have a lot of comments right now. I know we're going a little bit over on time, but it's been a busy day from men's basketball to Wake Forest. As Chris said, the best home game of the year coming up this weekend.
Oh, now wait a minute. Before we do that, let me do a little sponsor plug. Malcolm, do you have the second camera going where you can show the Terror Gnome and the helmet next to him? All right. So that little lunch pail mini helmet. Campus Emporium, longtime sponsor of TechSideline.com, is selling Bud Foster commemorative items. That's one of them. The mini helmet there is $39.99. If you're just listening on the podcast, it's a black helmet with WIN, W-I-N, painted on each side, team on the front, and then LPD on the back. Now, I think most Tech fans know this. What does WIN stand for? W-I-N.
What's important now?
What's important now? But Campus Emporium is selling those for $40 a pop, and they've got some Bud Foster T-shirts, commemorative T-shirts that they're also selling for short sleeve for $19.99 and long sleeve for $24.99. If you go to Tech Sideline and it's easy to find the Campus Emporium featured item on, particularly when you're looking on desktop. It's over in the borders. So awesome. Sponsor plug, neat stuff. And I guess that'll be a permanent fixture of the podcast set now.
There we go. Next to Terror Gnome and his lunch pail.
Terror Gnome and his little lunch pail, right.
And the lunch pail is the same color as the helmet. That kind of works out well. So.
Yeah, it works well.
All right, Malcolm. Well, I'm sure, again, a lot to get through, whether it's basketball questions, football, Bud Foster memories. What do we got?
All right, I want to start personally. I remember the last time you wore the opposing team's colors, It did not go well.
Oh, man.
Oh, is anybody ragging on me for wearing Wake Forest colors?
A few people.
Yeah, we forgot to get to that. This is actually a Radford High School shirt that I'm wearing.
That is right. He did wear 2 colors that week.
Then my accidental Duke shirt. I thought about this when I put this on this morning. I was like, dude, you're wearing Wake Forest colors. But it's a Radford High School shirt. My daughter is running in the regional cross-country meet today. She's a senior. They won a state championship when she was a freshman. And don't want to jinx them. Let's just say they've got a really good shot at winning one this year as well. So this is a Radford
What's her name?
shirt. Annalise.
Good luck to Annalise today. That's awesome.
Yeah. And Annalise has said she wants to go to Tech. She has put in her application. Most Radford kids do get accepted by Tech. So she'll probably be a freshman there next year.
There you
go. All right, Malcolm.
Trying to figure out my notepad. All right,
dead air, man. No dead air.
Michael Fullen asks, does Wake, well, I guess we already answered that, but does Wake really scare you in a home game environment versus a road game?
It's no difference to me.
No different, yeah.
Tech these days, they're as good on the road as they are at home.
Yeah.
And it's not like, I mean, if Tech played at Wake Forest, the stadium would be half filled with Tech fans.
And again, the weird thing is Tech tends to play better on the road.
Yeah, a lot of times they do. Yeah,
and it's a pattern this year too.
Yeah.
All right, Eric Fisher. Any comments on the Willie Taggart firing and the whole FSU situation?
They better get this right, or as somebody put it on the board, they're going to become Tennessee. Their school president is retiring at the end of the year, which basically makes their athletic director an interim guy. And doesn't have an athletics background anyway. He was like in school administration, I think, is what someone told me. I wouldn't want to walk into that job as a head coach. I mean, you didn't even give the last guy 2 years. I mean, you're inheriting a dumpster fire. You don't know who your boss is going to be in 6 months, and the fan base only gave you 2 years.
Who in the world is going to agree to that job?
I think it's not a good job right now.
It's like a James Johnson taking over for Seth Greenberg situation.
Yeah, it's just, I don't think it's
except Seth was a pretty good coach.
Right, yeah.
But JJ never should have taken that job.
Well, if it was basketball, it's only 13 scholarship players. You can tear the roster down in a matter of one offseason. And you can't do that when you got 85 scholarship football players. I mean, there's a rotten culture at Florida State. Herb Street went on one of his
So you go to my personal Twitter feed, Will Stewart TSL, and I quote tweeted, Herbie started doing these videos where he did the one about Tech where he's like so bad. Yeah. Well, in this one he's holding a red Solo cup. Shout out to Toby Keith, and they're sitting around talking, and he goes off on Florida State for about a minute.
He's like, you see their team gain 15 yards, then Florida State guy will make a tackle, and he'll get up and then he'll start talking trash. And he's like, dude, you just gave up 15 yards.
You just gave up a first down, Yeah, all they want to do is fight. They don't want to play football.
He said they need to go back and watch the Bobby Bowden days of Florida
Right.
State.
So,
just like Miami needs to go back and watch the guys from the 80s.
Right. So they have a culture problem at Florida State. And when you're dealing with 85 scholarship players, you can't rip that roster up in 1 year. You've got to do it over a number of years. So whether or not Willie Taggart is a good coach, when he rebuilt programs in the past, they started winning in like his third year.
Yeah.
Think about if you're a junior on that team.
So I don't think it's necessarily fair to him what they did, because I don't think anybody could have turned their program around in 2 years. I think their culture, that Jimbo, who is massively overpaid in my opinion, I think the culture that he let get created there is bad. Oof. And they're going to have to bring in somebody and give them 4 or 5 years before they even talk about whether the guy's on the hot seat, in my opinion.
Well, what made him snap was they got stomped by Miami.
Yeah.
By a not good Miami
mediocre
football
Miami team.
Yeah.
So they're going to miss 2 bowls in a row, most likely. And if they get this hire wrong, they're in the next Tennessee. Is what it
Think about this
like.
real quick. If you're a
with
junior,
less money.
If you're a junior on the team right now, you had Coach Fisher your freshman year, okay, then an interim coach the final game of the year, then the bowl game, then you had Coach Taggart your sophomore year. He's fired midway through your junior year. You've got an interim coach through your junior year. And then you've got another coach your senior year.
People are like, get ready to mind the transfer portal for Florida State players. Or can we pick off any Florida State recruits? I kind of hope not, to be honest with you.
Did you see where that former 5-star defensive tackle from Alabama wound up going?
Colorado.
Right.
Because nobody.
Well,
because
there's an
who wants-
Alabama connection there. Their new head coach is a former Alabama assistant.
Okay.
That's true, but there's also the fact that who wants to take a player who quit after 2 weeks?
Good point. Great question. Do you want to make sure
got
we
us
get
fired up.
Yep. Yep.
Regarding the best Bud moments, Tom Lester brought up Burnop interviewing Bud after Frank's last bowl game.
Yeah.
I have a vague recollection of that being a really good interview. Yeah,
Did he go into any more detail about it?
That's about it.
It
He
was
said
pretty
it's
emotional interview.
The last hurrah for the Beamer era.
yeah.
Yeah, you gotta love Buddy. Where's his emotions on his sleeve?
I'll add on that real quick. A great moment I think about, just like away from games and X's and O's, was when Bud, of course, hugging Fuente at the end of the UNC game last year when they toppled each other. But then there's with the UVA moment, him
And
Shane and Coach Beam
yeah.
all hugging each other.
When that
UVA.
clinched a bowl game in
Yep.
Gamers last year.
Yep, in Charlottesville.
okay.
That was a really
Yeah,
kind of
cool.
powerful moment. So great point there.
All right, Ronnie Adams. Did your outlook for B-ball change any after last night?
No,
Not
because I
really.
think Clemson's bad, and I thought Clemson was bad coming into. I thought Clemson was picked 11th in the ACC,
Exactly, yeah.
which in my opinion is too high. I don't think they're a good team at all. They lost so much. So I honestly, most people didn't think this. Most people thought Clemson was a heavy favorite. I actually kind of thought the game was a crapshoot. So it doesn't really change my outlook, other than the fact that I think Landers Nolly, I already thought he was going to be good. Now I think he can be really good.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It's nice. It's a win I didn't expect. But
Virginia Tech once under James Johnson was 1-0 in the ACC when they played a December ACC game, and then they went 2-14 or 2-16,
However many games they were
or
playing
however
at that
many there
point
were
in
in the
time.
ACC then.
All right, another question from Eric Fisher. If the team keeps playing with the same focus and intensity they had at Notre Dame for the rest of the season, how many wins do we pick up?
3,
Yeah, I would agree.
3-1 the rest of the way.
Yeah, I think that's certainly doable.
Yeah, I said it earlier. I never would have said this after the Duke game, but having seen another month's worth of evidence, and of course, some of it's going to come down to injuries. If anything's like watching Deshaun Crawford play against Notre Dame, he's not healthy, and that's a shame.
Yeah, because he was such a good player when he was healthy.
But yeah, I see 3-1.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tech will beat Georgia Tech and Pitt. Georgia Tech, I think, got their one win out of their system against Miami.
Yeah.
Pitt's just so bad offensively.
But they always.
Pat
protect
Narduzzi's
so
going to bring
hard.
his
Yeah,
A game
I
against
know.
Tech.
Oh, I mean, I know that, but but they're incompetent offensively.
Okay.
So,
I hope you're right.
Yeah, like they're like Virginia, Miami. They're just bad.
Yeah.
They're like Notre Dame with less talent, right? Much less talent. So I think I see Tech winning those two games, and I think the other two are pretty much toss-ups at this point.
Fair enough.
How about the OSU upset for Bud moments?
That was one heck of a
That
game
was
plan.
masterful.
Yeah.
So that's Ohio State 2014. I remember. So just like after that 2013 Alabama game, Alabama fans were freaking out about their offensive line. I went to that game up in Columbus in 2014, and Ohio State fans were convinced that their offensive line was garbage after that night.
And they won the national championship.
They went undefeated after that.
So
won
that
the
team had
national championship.
Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, and they had 7 carries that night. Because
Yeah.
we completely fooled their quarterback in the read option game. It was a Bear defense, showed them so many fronts that we had never shown on film.
Deion Clark's finest moment.
Yeah,
right?
and just, yeah. Well, I won't go there.
As a
That was
player,
yeah.
as a player.
But yeah, it was such a brilliant game plan, and Ohio State went on to win the national title, and they didn't just beat teams; they hammered teams the rest of that year, man.
They took it to Alabama in the semifinals
Yeah,
that year.
they crushed them. Yeah,
Yeah,
great
good stuff.
Great point.
All right, I'm running out of time, but last question I'll ask is from John Houchins.
Right.
Will Taj Gary see the field again this year?
I don't anticipate it. I think if he was going to, he would have done it in one of the last 2 games.
Yeah, I mean they're playing Dalton Keene.
Yeah.
Instead of Taj
They've
Gary.
they've gone that route. Now, could it be different with Hendon Hooker at quarterback? Maybe, because obviously I don't think we'll necessarily see Dalton Keene in the personal protector escort role for him like we've seen him for Quincy Patterson. But yeah, I don't think so. I will say if he does play, I'm sure they're still planning on not playing him in any more than 3 more games.
Right.
So they would preserve his red shirt at this point.
Yeah, he's not likely to play, particularly if Keyshawn King is back.
Yeah.
All right. Great stuff on Facebook. Sorry it took a little bit longer to get to you guys. This might be the longest podcast we've ever done, but I think a lot to get to today, and I think rightfully so.
Wow,
So quickly, as we always do, Chris, for those people that want more great techsideline.com content, what's coming up the rest of the week?
A Brandon Patterson review of the Notre Dame game, the
Wake Forest
preview, an Inside the Numbers article, a Friday Q&A. We'll have recruiting articles.
The usual awesome stuff.
The usual awesome stuff. I would like to work in a basketball column somewhere, but there's no way. No way.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to let that game go without saying anything from a column standpoint.
So what I'm hoping is that somebody asks me a really good question in Friday Q&A, and I can
there
answer
you
it.
go. I'll be sure to do that as nobody does. How about that?
Of course,
Just for
there
you.
you go.
Will, if people want to get more great content from Tech Sideline on social media, what accounts can they follow?
Twitter, we are at Tech Sideline. We're not active on Instagram right now. We're Tech Sideline over there too, but we probably need to hire somebody to run that for us. And on Facebook, it's facebook.com/Tech Sideline.
And on YouTube as well.
Yes.
Like and subscribe.
We are all over the place.
Yes.
Which is see, I'm getting to where I'm going to stop calling us TechSideline.com and just start calling us Tech Sideline.
There you go.
Because it's not just about the website.
Great way to close the podcast there. Great show as always to everybody. I want to appreciate everybody who was watching or listening. Thanks to everybody for the comments. And we'll be back Monday morning. We'll be able to talk about the Wake Forest game, the Bud Foster ceremonies before the game. And then
by the way, get there about half an hour early, we are told. I think that's part of the information they're releasing.
Okay.
Game starts at 3:30, so if you want to see everything, be in your seat at 3, I guess.
Okay. There you go. And we'll maybe be able to talk about another Tech basketball win. They play Coppin State on Friday. So, yeah.
I suspect we'll be able to talk about another Tech basketball
Okay, cool. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast. For our terrific producer behind the scenes, Malcolm Stewart. On the podcast set, our managing editor, Chris Coleman, our founder and head honcho, Will Stewart. I'm Evan Hughes saying so long. Thanks so much for listening. This has been the Tech Sideline Podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm, and we'll talk to you on Monday morning.